Beep, 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 beep. Tea and wrapping up. Wrappings. Okay, folks, good morning. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is the Court of the Idiot Jester. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're a first-time viewer, buckle up. For those of you at the back, pay attention. The usual. I've got a great thing for you today here from Keith Jordan, who writes on his own blog a kind of personal testimony history about philosophical differences and those in which he's attempting to understand ideological division, what causes ideological division. So it's quite interesting, and I think it would be a good idea for you to have a look at the Our Duty group. I saw a thread last night on Twitter of people, I'm a parent, I'm being hounded by teachers, and it's good to look around for groups that are able to help and also to see what resources they have produced to help you deal with schools. So we're talking about Keith Jordan here from Our Duty group, but there's also Bayswater Support, Sex Matters, and Safe Schools UK, various people who've produced documentation on the ongoing spats in schools around gender ideology, critical race theory, and those sorts of things. So I'm just going to go through this with you. If you could helpfully subscribe, that would be great. Thank you very much. And perhaps share this if you would on Twitter, or become a warrior teacher or a Jesterite or PayPal me, the usual. It's all in the doobries, which is in the description of the video. Keith begins. I have been involved in resisting gender ideology for a long time. My first run-in came during my teaching career in 2010. I object to being told to lie about the sex of a new student. Things ramped up when my daughter started to identify as a trans man in 2015. With the dearth of information back then, I was moved to establish parent-peer support in the UK in 2018. In late 2019, the group I founded split into two factions, which became Our Duty and Bayswater. This was the first time I'd encountered ideological division within the movement. At its simplest, Our Duty rejected the affirmative model of care. Others were cautious about it. I was adamant the NHS was unsafe. Others took a different view. My vindication brings me no succour. I just wish I'd been more persuasive at the point when it mattered. In the last 5 years, we've seen more and more gender-critical groups emerge. By and large, this looks like a good thing. But is it? One key turning point for me was when we challenged the Executive Board and Board of Governors at the Tavistock in 2019. Parents told those present that the Tavistock GIDS and GIC were harming our children. That the adolescent cohort, mainly girls at this point, should not be treated the same way as prepubescent boys and middle-aged men, upon which almost all of available research centred. That there was no way of diagnosing who would persist, that our children had underlying conditions that made them susceptible, that there were no longitudinal studies into the adolescent cohort. Not only were our entreaties ignored by the Tavistock board, and they were most upset we got our story in the Sunday Times, but this episode was conspicuously absent from Hannah Barnes' book Time to Think, despite Hannah being with us on that day. This is me. It's interesting, isn't it? Always interesting to look at historical narratives and to listen to the experience of people who've been in the movement a while, and then to see what kind of thing has happened and why has it happened. It helps us to learn to collaborate better, I think. And I think that's what Keith is trying to do here in this article, is to tell that story. But this episode was conspicuously absent from Hannah Barnes' book Time to Think, despite Hannah being with us on that day. Now, the reason for that might well be that the focus on the book is on the dissent within the staff and on the evidence that does exist, and that strict adherence to the scientific method means there is no published, peer-reviewed, high-quality evidence to support our claims. That is true, and it is around this point that I think we have a problem. Jack Drescher, in a letter to the New York Times, wrote in 2013 that we have no way of knowing who would persist and who would desist. And consequently, what became known as the affirmative model of care was controversial. We always knew that social affirmation led to physical harm. What seems to be holding everything up is the need by many to have this knowledge confirmed in a peer review paper, or by the Cash Review interim report before it was given any credence, and every single day we delay results in buckets filled with adolescent breasts. If we see a building burning down, are we going to wait for an academic paper to be published that examines whether the outcome was negative or positive for the regeneration of the community, and how many who died by smoke inhalation or unsurvivable burns a secondary analysis? Or are we going to call the fire brigade and see if there's anything that can be done in the here and now? We know that academic research on transgender ideation is virtually impossible to get published because of the woke capture of academia. There is a high chance it might get compromised on its way through in any case because of gatekeeping. And such research will lag observations by years. There is scientific research, albeit of low quality, that seems to indicate that transgender ideation might be attributable to neurological or endocrinal differences. Even if such research were unequivocal and of high quality, it should not point to a recognition of transgenderism as a human characteristic. Instead, it should be used to identify effective treatment pathways to eliminate the ideation. Because the ideation leads to unnecessary harm, even if you want to qualify that by adding to those who detransition, and I do not. As I see it, the problems facing us are as follows. Trite facts are not given due weight. For example, transition is a lie, number one. Number two, observations are not given due weight. For example, kids are being harmed by this. Number three, research is too slow and too patchy and is a poor excuse for delays. And number four, the scientific method is placed above the alleviation of human suffering. It is this last point that drives me. Transgender ideation leads to human suffering. To end that suffering, we must end transgender ideation. Prevention is better than cure, and cure is better than lifelong treatment. Trite facts that need to be given more weight. The article then continues, and as per usual, I put the link in the doobers for you. Please do go and read it, because there is a lot more meat in the article than I've given you here this morning to get us started. This morning? Whatever it is. What time is it? It's about 3:30 in the morning. Mad. Right, let's go and have a look. Okay, see? Keith's taking the time to read it. You should take to write it. You should take the time to read it. Please do go and do so. And you can subscribe there to his Substack as well. Yes, I'm with Keith on this one. I think that we can see the harms. We don't need a scientific study to tell us. And it shouldn't matter what the polls say either. You know, people once thought eugenics were a good idea. People once thought lobotomy was a good idea. The government needs to stop this, and we know this, but they're not going to. And you're about to get a Labour one if we're not careful, right? And they certainly aren't going to stop it. So they're too busy, hand clapping the conversion of gay people through the government. Bloody left. Any rate, there you go. Go and read what our Keith has to say. Our duty, right? It's our duty to go and read our duty. I'll see you later. Have fun.